Hey, what's up, leaders? I'm so excited about the interview you're about to watch. Candi Rayes is going to share with us something that is probably harder than running a marathon. She's going to teach us how to be mindful. Yeah, mindfulness. Stay tuned, it's going to be awesome. Hey guys, I'm so excited to have you here today with my friend Candi. We're going to be discussing some awesome topics. So without further ado, Candi, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're here, and what you hope to bring with us over the next couple minutes?
Sure. Thanks, Danny, first, just for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. What I really want to talk to all of you about today is this topic of being mindful. And it will sound like, oh, what is she about to talk to me about? What are you actually getting us into, Danny? Why are you even doing this to us?
Yeah, we should
But
be doing
really,
manly stuff like chopping down trees and stuff, right?
exactly. I mean, I'm sure that's what they're expecting to hear. And here I come
We're not
on
talking about
your
chopping trees
show.
down today?
Yeah, mindfulness. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to get into this topic of being mindful. And what does it mean? Because it is something that can truly help your relationships, your leadership, just life in general. And it's something that I'm a fan of and really try to embrace. And when I say try to embrace, because it's not always easy.
Right. So why should I listen to you? What do you know about this?
Oh, what do I know about it? Why should you listen to it? Well, I will tell you that I practice it. I'm not the expert in it, though. I never say I am absolutely the expert, because the minute that you say that, someone will prove you wrong in that
Yeah.
field, right?
Yeah.
They're just, I have to prove you wrong. It's like a competition. I'll tell you that I study it. I study leadership, and I've used this in my role as a leader, but I've used it at home. And then I've found times when I haven't used it where I fall short.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm bringing it forward.
You mentioned business. Like, what does that entail for you? What are you currently doing? What have you done?
Well, I can give you a little bit of background as to where I've started and where I am now, because it's looked a little bit differently since all of this has started over the last 3-4 months with COVID here in the US. So if I go back, I'll tell you that I went to school for human resource development, received a minor in labor relations, spent a lot of time in corporate environments where I was studying and practicing human resources, but primarily in leadership development and training. And that really is my passion, and where I've spent over 20 years in my career.
So you
I
started
also
when you were
teach at
12?
Oakland University.
You started when you were
So
12?
yeah, I have a range of college students compared to those that are in leadership roles.
Right.
I've been able to do that in a lot of different companies, but most recently was at a company, Meritor, and some may be familiar with it, but it was the company that makes the drive lines, axles, brakes for semis, big vehicles, military vehicles, and spent 6 years of my career, most recently there, leading a global team up until COVID happened.
That's
And then
thank
there
the
is,
virus, right?
I know, isn't that what everybody's saying now? Up until COVID.
Yeah.
But life changed. But it actually is a great change for me. I was working still in HR and in leadership development, leading a team there for the first 2 months of everything happening in Michigan. And I could then start to sense a change. And my company said, we're downsizing. We have to downsize. We can't make it if we don't. And so they started downsizing executives out of the company. And being in leadership development, I'm also very aware that at the end of the day, although I know it is absolutely critical and needed, it's one thing that they will cut in the midst of business.
Good.
And so that kind of led me to where I am now. And where it led me to is really following one of my passions, which is getting back into consulting and leadership development and coaching. And so in the last month, 2 months possibly, might have been by now, we start to lose track of it, but I've started a company called Root Leadership. And it really is focused on leadership coaching and training and development.
Awesome. So if I was one of your leadership students, and you said, Danny, I think mindfulness is where we're going to focus on this session, what would that entail? What are you going to tell me? How do I do it? Why do I do it? Is it a tactics thing, or is it a mindset thing? What is being mindful?
So the first thing I would say is mindfulness really, if I were to simplify it, and I love simple, I love just breaking it down to simple, is just being present where you are. So right now, in this moment, am I being present, actually having a conversation with you, Danny, or am I thinking about what I have to do when I get off this call? Whether my dogs might bark, whether someone might come in my door, where am I at this present moment? And that's really what mindfulness is just, can we be present? We think we are, but in reality, 47% of our day is spent somewhere else. Even though we might be sitting right here, it could be spent somewhere else in our mind.
For sure.
So if I think about what would it mean for you and I to be able to talk about mindfulness, it's one, pausing and saying, hey, how can we start to take a look at this concept of just being present where you are? Because if we could stop and pause and really truly listen, your relationships are going to thrive. Your leadership and your teams will thrive because they'll actually feel like you're invested in them.
Right. Has there been times in your career or maybe personal financial life, whatever, that you haven't been, and you looking back and say, man, that really affected me negatively, or you can see the consequences of not, being present in the moment?
So if I was to ask my husband, he would tell you there are lots of moments. So maybe don't ask him, but I will tell you.
He's the next interview. It'll be fine.
Yeah, he's the next one. Bring him on. He'll tell you all of the times this isn't working.
Right.
But I'll tell you that it's hard, and I have failed at it many, many times. I have to work on it always. I would tell you that once you learn the idea of mindfulness, you don't just become a mindful person. It takes practice over and over and over again. So if I think about a specific time, oh my gosh, I could give you one a day probably, or one a week, because it is that hard to actually practice this concept. But I'll give you a couple of examples. One is just being with a leadership role and having teams of employees. I had one employee that I really look back and I go, wow, I missed it with this person. And it's because he came in and I was thinking about all that he was doing wrong, all of the fails he kept having. And I'm like, I've trained him, I've coached him. Why isn't he getting it? And he just kept coming into me and it just kept failing. And at that point, I had already made up my mind. I was terminating this employee. He wasn't working out. And it wasn't until probably a week or two after I had terminated him, I really started to pause and reflect on everything that had happened. And what I realized is that in every one of those conversations over the last month up until his termination, my mind was already made up on the fact that I had to let him go.
Right.
I had to. At that point, he'd already just rocked too many boats in the company. I mean, this was earlier in my leadership journey. And so I realized at that moment, I missed a big opportunity to really listen to what was going on, because I may have picked up on something if I really paused and listened to all of our conversations rather than just already be focused on the next thing and how do I hire the next person because I have to get the job done.
You mentioned like pausing. Is that a big part of mindfulness? And do you have maybe something that you do on a regular or habitual way where you just take a time to pause throughout the day to just think, I guess?
Yes, I will tell you that is the big thing with mindfulness is just pausing. I like the word pause. One, it just reminds myself, pause, place yourself to where you are and really focus on what is going on. For me, I have to step away from technology, which is absolutely insane right now with the world shifting. And my type of work now is now being done virtually.
Right.
It is not what I necessarily want to do all the time. I'm really a face-to-face person and I really pick up on those cues from people. But for me, stepping away from technology helps. Actually getting out in nature for me and just being present out there and not with headphones in my ears,
Right.
but actually just connecting out in nature is really, really helpful for me in order to be present in where I am.
That's awesome. I find my work is different than your work, but I find myself getting physically, and like if I go to a house fire, I'm an officer, so I'm in charge of a group of people, but I'm also working. Like I'm physically dragging hose lines into the building. We're doing searches, but my job is mostly to make sure everybody's safe and that we're accomplishing our task. And that I found that I have to physically stop doing what I'm doing, let go of the effort that I'm putting in, and I have to take a breath. Like I have to calm myself down, and then I can. It's like the world opens up, and I can think. Well, what are we doing? Where are we? What is our mission? What is our task? And I find that I have to be very like I have to do it multiple times because it's so easy when you're in the mix of working. You know, for some people in like corporate America, it's answering the email or it's answering the phone or going from meeting to meeting to meeting. And I definitely finding that moment, and I have to almost make it a habit. Like, have I stopped in the last 20 minutes and just taken a breath and paused and be present with what I think is that super important. Are there any other techniques besides physically stopping and separating yourself from technology? Anything else that you do on a regular basis?
Well, the deep breathing definitely is one, and it just centers me again. If you can practice meditation at all, even if you start with 30 seconds, 1 minute of meditation, shutting everything else out, that really helps. For me, I am a very type A personality. I go, 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 and I thrive on going and moving fast and not slowing down. I have to actually channel that in. I know when I first started it, I started it with a app called Headspace. Some
Yeah.
people have used it,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a little too hokey for some people, and they're
Yeah.
not even about to go there. Honestly, just slowing down and just whatever you need to do, whether it's just pausing and just focusing on your breathing, maybe just saying a prayer or whatever that is to center you before you go about your day.
What would you define as meditation? Is it, because I think most people, if you've never read anything or done anything, it's you need to go to the Himalayas and you need to put on a robe and shave your head, which I've got taken care of, and sit with your legs crossed at a monastery for 6 months and chant. Is that that's what you're talking about, right?
No. And honestly, I'm going to be real honest. At some point, maybe in my life, I would go out there and do that. Maybe give me about 20 more years. I'll slow down a little more.
Right.
For me, it's just clearing your mind. I mean, in reality, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts that go through our mind in a day. So think about that. How many go through your mind in an hour, in a minute? Probably just in this conversation. It's clearing your mind.
Yeah.
It's just personally clearing your mind from the clutter, and it's being present where you are. So if I'm doing this as I'm waking up in the morning, am I present as to just, wow, I woke up today.
Yeah.
I'm here, I'm alive, I'm breathing. It's something as simple as that, but meditating is really just slowing it down and thinking about nothing other than your breathing, which is really bizarre for some people to do.
I used that app for a little Headspace as well. And it was funny because the things that would pop into my head, like something I hadn't thought about. And, I'm 40 years old. In 30 years, I would all of a sudden jump in my head. I'm like, I'm not trying to think about that. And it was in my head. It was weird. Like your brain just wants to have something. And I would agree. It was very challenging and different, but I'll put a link in the description to Headspace. Maybe that's your thing. Next question. Mindfulness is important. I think you've seen it and showed it in your career. Is there ever a time though where you don't necessarily need to be mindful of the people that you're talking to, and you can just be focused on yourself and tune everybody out? Is that okay?
I think it's the reality of our world,
Right.
right? I mean, to say that you could be mindful every second of the day, I don't think there's a person out there that can be. So we are going to spend our time focusing on a lot of different things at once. Where I find it the most valuable for me, one is to just calm my stress down and being mindful for practicing it at minutes at a time. It just brings my stress level down. But in relationships, that's when it's important. And one of the things that I like to ask myself, is it important for me with this relationship right now, whether it's my team, whether it's someone I'm coaching, whether it's my husband, my kids, whatever that might be. Is it okay for me to not be present in this moment, or do I need to focus?
Right. Yeah.
Great example. I called my husband this morning and I was leaving an appointment, and he has a cue, and he may not know until he watches this video or I tell him later. But one of his cues are when I'm talking to him, he goes, nice. And I'm like, you're multitasking. You are not present. You are not here with me.
Yeah.
And so for those of you that have significant others out there, I would think about your cue you may be giving to them that you're not fully present.
Yeah, I was not mindful this morning. I work, and I was getting off work, and it was like 6:50 in the mornings, and I was finishing up my report. So I work a 24-hour shift, and I had 2 reports to finish. I'm typing, and Andrea texts me real quick, hey, can you pick up toothpaste? And I type back, yes. So go to the grocery store. I bring in 2 tubes of toothpaste, and she said, oh, did I say toothpaste? I meant toothbrush. So I look at my text message and it said, can you bring me a toothbrush? Because last night she decided hers was old and she threw it away. And she didn't have one this morning. And I literally just I spent 10 seconds instead of 12 seconds to actually read what she said. And I failed her. So I ran to drugstore and bought her toothbrush. But I wasn't
so nice of you.
How I tried. I definitely wasn't paying attention. And I think this is important on the other side. If you're trying to, if you need somebody's attention, I've failed at this with my kids. I'll walk in and they're on their iPad or they're doing something, and I start talking. Hey, Levi, I need you to do this and this, this and this and this. And he goes, what? And I get mad. Like, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
But he wasn't. And I can't expect him. He was paying attention, but not to me. And I found that I need to say, hey, buddy, I need to talk to you. Let him close his focus, whatever he's doing, and look at me. And then we can have a moment, because I found that sometimes we demand mindfulness from other people, but we're interrupting them, and they might have been being mindful for something else. Like, I try to be good when Andrea talks to me and I'm on the computer, I shut the computer and then say, what? Because I'm not a good multitasker. If she's talking to me and I'm doing this or doing something else, I didn't hear it. I'm going to buy the toothpaste instead of a toothbrush every time. So that's been tough for me.
You know, you said a couple of things there, and I'll tell you a couple of good techniques and practices, whether you have teams of people, whether you just have relationships you're around at home, right? Shutting down the technology. And one of the cues that I would do with my phone when I was at work is actually put it aside, flip it upside down, and put it out of your mind's, like your eyes view. Because the reality is, our eyes are drawn back to those things if they're in our view. And so just putting those away. So I will tell you that when I'm having any conversation, I have to do that. But I also have to respect other people. If I'm walking in, if I'm with a team, I'll walk in and go, do you have a minute?
Right.
Before I even start talking.
Yeah.
I sometimes let that guard down a little bit at home though, and I walk in and just demand, sometimes just like you, right. And I have to catch myself.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like I failed that quite a bit, but I'm learning, and I think that's the goal, right? Because whatever we do, we're not going to be good at it, and that's like, I'm a type A personality. I want to be good at everything and win and beat the game, but I'm not. And mindfulness is not something you win, right? You don't accomplish mindfulness. You steadily practice it. If what I'm hearing is what you're saying.
Absolutely. It's practice. It's something, I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. You have to continue to practice it. The reality is, once I started to practice it though, I noticed the differences in my relationships at work, my relationships at home, my relationships with my kids. Mm-hmm. And I notice when I'm not, because they are impacted and the stress level is high as we're having those conversations.
Who would you say is the most mindful person that you know?
I had a team member, her name was Vanessa Davis, and she had this ability to almost just look through you. And she was is my role model, even though I don't work with her daily. I think about her and how present she could be in the moment. And sometimes it would be frustrating to me because I would want to move really fast. Right. And she would go, wait a minute, let's think about this a little bit more. I'm like, oh, okay, slow down, slow your brain down. And so she was constantly that person that would just center me again and just bring a calm back over me so I could be present in that moment. And it took a little while of working with her to realize that, but I would tell you, she's probably the one that I think about whenever I talk about this topic.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a whole family. I don't know how well you know the Naughtons, but all of the Naughtons, and they're my kids' teachers and they're my friends. When you talk to them, they look at you in the eye the entire time and shake their head the whole time. And I love talking to them because I'm like, they're listening. And I can find myself like, I don't know if I've seen this in classes. You're a teacher, right? You teach as well. I teach, and if someone's looking at me shaking their head, and maybe that's just a habit, maybe they have a twitch, I find myself, I teach that person. I will walk over and sit next to and I'll walk over here if they're looking at me, and I just get so engaged. It's so powerful to think somebody is being mindful of me when I'm trying to share something. And I try to remember that. I'm like, if I can look at somebody, smile and shake my head while they're talking to me, that is like magic for your soul. Like it's awesome.
Right. Well, and think about that. If you put that into your relationships, whether it's work relationships or home life, if we gave people that much attention and just undivided attention as to what they're doing at that moment.
Yeah, for sure. One thing we're doing in this challenge is that we divide some focus time with our different family members and ourselves for 30 minutes a day. And I found, and it seems a little silly, but I'll set a timer and I'm going to spend 30 minutes with my kids. And I tell them, hey, what do you guys want to do? And I put my phone away. And it's been, we're on day 9, and it's been so helpful to have just 30-minute blocks where I am not going to do anything except for jump on the trampoline with you. And it's been super helpful. And I find it, sometimes I feel like it drags, like when I'm playing with Play-Doh and I don't want to because I've got little ones. I'm like, oh, I can't play with Play-Doh anymore. But it's important. Like it's so important to just have that quality time. With mindfulness, I know you had a list of resources. What of that I'll share, I'll put in the description. Of those resources, which ones really stood out to you? Any books, any things that you've read that, hey, you should definitely go check this stuff out?
You know, I could have sent you pages and pages of them, but I didn't want to overwhelm people. Plus, I like under the number 5, right? 3 to 5 resources I feel like people can pick or choose from. I will tell you, depending on where you're at in life, there were some that I put on the resource page for your viewers, that if they're just in relationships and they want to understand what does mindfulness mean for a relationship, there's a couple of great articles out there. I will tell you, if you're a leader, the 7 practices of a mindful leader is something for you to take a look at. It's a great book that you can order. There's also a couple of, I love TED Talks, right? Being a professor at a university, I absolutely love them because they're based on research for the most part. But there is a TED Talk, but there's also this 60-minute episode with John Cabot, who actually founded this in about 1979. I would tell you to watch that. That's a great video, just to at least understand it and where it came from.
Awesome. So for the guys that are watching this that are doing the Earn Your Title Challenge, these are your challenges for the next week or 2 weeks. You get a point for reading or watching one of the articles or videos. I watched the TED Talk just before we got on. It's cool. It's very simple. It's only 10 minutes long. You can get a point for consuming any of that information, and then you can get a point for 1 minute of meditation. So I said, when I was talking to Candi earlier, I'm like, so I was thinking like 10 minutes. She's like, you should start with 1 because that's going to be really hard. So if you can sit down and not think about anything for 1 minute, you can earn another point. So that's 2 points for this challenge. Candi, is there anything else you'd like to say about mindfulness?
I would say just be open to it and really become aware. And don't be hard on yourself when you don't get it. And if you try to do that 1 minute and you only get through 10 seconds and your mind wanders, it's okay. Just keep practicing until you get there. It doesn't become something you will be great at over a few minutes. It's going to take years and years of practice, but it'll help your relationships.
Awesome. And she didn't ask me to say this, but I will say, the greatest experiences I've had in my life are when I had somebody coaching me.
Mhm.
And you're obviously coaching leaders, you're coaching people to become a better person. How can people get a hold of you? Website, your LinkedIn, Twitter. Where's the best way to get a hold of you if somebody would like to get a little bit more help on things like mindfulness, becoming a better leader?
If you're looking for coaching or just really understanding more about who I am and kind of how I operate in my coaching and leadership development business, definitely go out to LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm posting every single day out there about leadership concepts. I have a website, root-leadership.com. I've attached it in the link that I've given to you, Danny. Or just reach out to you, Danny, and I'm sure that you can give them my email as well. But LinkedIn, I would say, is the easiest one. You could find me out there. My website, everything is connected to it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have all that information in the description. Candi, thank you so much. I'm sure the guys are going to go out and, sit under a tree, shave their head, and try not to think about squirrels.
Absolutely.
All
I
right. Thank
expect
you so much.
nothing less.
All right. Take
All
care.
right. Thank you. Bye.
Wow. Awesome. That was awesome. I plan on putting that into action. I'm going to try to get my 1 minute of meditation in today without thinking about squirrels.